Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast. I am your host, Michael Ford, back for another week as we change the complexion of the comic book universe, one draft pick at a time. I am joined this week by Black Delegate Randy. Randy, say what's up to the people.
Hello, hello, hello.
And if you're new to this podcast, I apologize, but what we are doing is exploring race and comics and superheroes through the lens of a draft. And we kicked off our new season, season 8 of the Racial Draft. And it's great that Randy's here because, Randy, you won the lottery. I mean, not the money lottery. There was no, financial gain here, but you got in a lot of ways a priceless reward in the first pick of the season 8 draft. Let's just get right into it. Let's talk about, actually, before we get right into it, let me quickly run down the first 10 picks, the first round of the racial draft, and then we'll get into pick by picks. So the first pick was the Black Delegation, and that was Storm. Second pick was the Native American delegation, and they drafted Peter Parker, aka the Spectacular Spider-Man. The Swana Mena delegation drafted Tony Stark, Iron Man. The multiracial delegation drafted Bird, Plane, Superman. The East Southeast Asian delegation drafted Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic. The white delegation drafted Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing. The South Asian delegation drafted Diana Prince, Wonder Woman. The Jewish delegation drafted Logan, aka Wolverine. The Latin delegation drafted Doom. And the 10th pick was the Polynesian delegation, and they drafted Jean Grey. So let's get into the first pick. So you drafted Storm. Great pick, great character that is, much beloved and much more importantly, much beloved by our people. But I'll let you speak a little bit more about just, all of the thought process that went into this number one pick.
Well, anytime you get like the X-Men, there's always a consideration of like how often does that character show up, just because there's so many, and like editors, writers and all that, they try to kind of give different amounts of screen time just depending on like, whatever story is happening. But Storm has seen a huge glow up in terms of how often she shows up, like not just in X-Men.
She's an Avenger now.
Right, exactly. Not just X-Men mythos. She has her own solo thing, and she still pops up in mutant mythos, but it's not just there, right? Like she's not just over in her little corner, and she's not just over with, Wakanda, Black Panther. She's
I was about to say that. I mean, she's had that crossover aspect for years.
Yeah. And on top of that, now we're seeing her explore more of the sort of mystical, supernatural side of her too, right? Like you see, just sort of being a fan of her myself, like she's my favorite superhero. I'll tell anybody that. But even if you were kind of new to the character, you're like, dang, she's stepping up and sort of branching out more to be, beyond just an X-Men character.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention the part that she showed up in the What If trailer.
Right.
I mean,
exactly. This season is going to be when we finally introduce like the world to that version of Storm.
I mean,
not just like our own little obscure. Right.
Before any other X-Man.
Yep.
Shows up in, I know it is the MCU, but it's kind of not the MCU because the multiverse or whatever, but still, to have her be the first X-Man to be featured in the What If program.
Yeah.
And not through some kind of shenanigans. That's huge.
It's huge. And I feel like it's only going to get bigger from there, because it's like the amount of crossover that's happening right now, it feels very purposeful. It's not just her, but like, yay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I may be the tiny little bit of a bit of a naysayer, I would wonder if there's how much further they can take it. Obviously, we know that unfortunately these solo books tend not to uh, make it out, of
Yeah.
12 issues.
Yeah.
Um, and then it takes a while before there's another one. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with sales. So let's
Yeah.
hope people are out there selling the Storm book. I do like, we talked about this before. I do like the status quo that they gave her by
Hmm.
basing her out of Atlanta. That seems like it's unique as far as X characters go. Giving them a home that's not the X Mansion and giving them a reason to kind of set up shop on their
And a
own.
home that's not just New York generally, that's like overflowing with superheroes and stuff. Right. She's
Yeah,
down in her
yeah, for
own
sure.
area. So,
Yeah, and not just kind of arbitrarily chosen. No
hmm,
offense to the fact that the X-Men are now based out of New Orleans, but
yeah.
because but there's really nothing that's cultural. I mean, it's mutants, right? So there's nothing cultural about New Orleans that would
Hmm.
make them associate with New Orleans.
I mean, if
Whereas,
anything, that was just, I think Gail Simone is like, I really like Gambit. So she just
like,
had him being there.
yeah. Whereas, Atlanta, I mean, we've talked about it before. There
Hmm.
aren't a lot of black cities in the fictional comic book universe, but there
Yeah.
aren't really a lot of um, characters that are just allowed to immerse themselves over the long term in black culture. I mean, you get a little taste of it in Chicago with Williams.
Yeah.
You know, Luke Cage in Harlem is kind of like comes and goes. For that nature. But there's a lot of narrative. There are a lot of narrative opportunities that come from having Storm be in Atlanta and having the opportunity to connect, not just as a mutant, but as a member of the Black community in fictional Marvel Universe Atlanta. So,
Yeah.
but I say that to say that I mean, is this something that could be a springboard into other things, or is this just we just have to hope that these things maintain themselves for the next couple of years, given what we know about racial backlashes?
Well, my thing is the reason why I feel so particularly optimistic is sort of a perfect storm.
What
You
do you
know,
that?
you know I intend my puns. Yeah, there's this section. It's not in the comic, and it's not just that show that in those other comics. I'm noticing that she's showing up across multiple media. And I've always felt like that was sort of the linchpin. I mean, anybody could kind of, know that. But when you have across multiple media, movies in my mind are like the top tier thing that you sort of aspire to because of how wide reaching they are, how, everybody, especially given it's the MCU, right? So
Mhm.
it's like that's like top tier paramount viewing that you absolutely want to go make sure that you're part of the conversation. So she's not there yet. But video games in my mind are right underneath that because you may or may not tune in to the TV show, right?
Mhm.
Everybody, that's not like a given that you're absolutely going to tune in to see What If, or that you're going to tune in to see X-Men, 97 or what have you. You absolutely across social media, you're going to see mention of the game,
I mean,
regardless of whether or not you play it.
that is true.
You're gonna see people that are like talking about how they love the game, how they hate the game, blah blah blah, who should be added, this, that, and the other. You're going to see mention of the video game.
I mean,
That's sort of my hierarchy of it.
I agree with one minor caveat. I think that the
Hmm.
MCU, one of the things that they innovated in, particularly in the Disney Plus era, is the portrayals of these characters on TV are also
Hmm.
the characters that will be in the movies. So there's a lot
Hmm.
more, it's a lot grayer of the line, blurrier of the line between television and movies. I think when we talked back in the days of the Arrowverse, for instance, that's a situation where, these characters are kind of stuck. They're stuck in that medium and you're not going to
Yeah.
see them, kind of ubiquitous. Whereas I think that Marvel has, we've talked about this as well, things like the theme parks, things like, the fact that we've seen Sam Wilson, for instance, the way
Hmm.
that he looks in the films, in the theme parks, even though technically that look debuted on the streaming service. You know,
Yeah.
I think there's a bit more of a cohesion on the Marvel
I
side.
I mean that's fair, but at the same time, not so much with the animations.
No, no, definitely not with the animation, but I mean
So like
in terms of live action is more what I meant.
right. Yeah.
So
So that's kind of why I said that, because it's like we have the animation, it works, it does, but I feel like the conversation, I don't know, maybe because that's the danger of social media. You kind
true,
of
true.
assume that your perception expands wider than it does. But like we had conversation in terms of, around, people were talking with Bo DeMaio and all this other stuff with how he handled Storm, and for better or worse, had conversations around that. Fan cams and stuff were emerging, but I feel like there's a lot going on in terms of how much she's being featured. Even when when Storm's comic was about to debut, I think she was one of the ones that like got a trailer, right? That came from Marvel. They were like, Storm is coming. So I feel like it doesn't feel like they intend for it to just be like, throwing chum out so we can appease the Negroes. It feels like she really is genuinely getting an effort there.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, and I think we had made this point for a while. I think we had made this point a while ago. Back when Marvel didn't have the rights to Storm, when it was a Fox,
Hmm.
when she was a Fox character in live action, Marvel felt like they needed to put effort into trying to find another black female character to push
Yeah.
because Storm was so ubiquitous and so popular, but
Hmm.
out of their hands. And now that Storm is back in their hands, I think while I hope that that doesn't mean they're going to push some of the other black female characters less. I do think that they're like, well, good. There are all these things that we can do with Storm, and we can, have her be as, if not more popular than even a Black Panther is, and we need to capitalize on that. So,
Well, I have been smacked down multiple times by my lofty expectations, so I'm not going to get too up on my high horse. But I do think that there's a bit more purpose that's being added, in particular to her comic series that came out, right? So again, like you said, she's based in Atlanta. Her creative team, the writer is African, if I'm not mistaken.
yes, yes.
Also, her supporting cast, right? Because she could have easily had just any old body from the X-Men. She could have easily had some other mutant along with her that just was like one of her people that she typically associates with. And they choose Frenzy.
Yeah.
They got Joanna Cargill, who formerly a villain, right? Formerly a villain, and then recently she kind of had a little kind of auxiliary sort of baby glow up
Mhm.
too. She's not, full X-Men status yet, but she's there.
And
Um, and
can I jump
and
in real quick?
go
I
ahead.
don't know if you're current on the other X books, but she popped up more recently in one of the X-Men books, and as kind of like a quick mentor for Oya.
Yeah, yeah. She calls her little sister, I think.
Hmm.
She's something like that. And I'm like it sounds crazy to kind of like geek out over little tiny things like that, but you sort of see the dots connect, and it does feel like she's taking on this sort of elder statesman role, as opposed to just sort of giving her like power feats and stuff like that,
Well, it's very
which
meta.
that means a lot.
It's very meta in a sense. I mean, we know how important she is. We know how important she is outside of the world of comics. And it would make sense that in the same way that you have young girls who look up to Storm as a character that's always been there as a fictional character, that in universe, that there are young black girls who look to Storm as, again, we play a lot of different Eve games, but like, sisterhood, big sister, big sis, you know, big sis Aurora.
Absolutely.
having
Absolutely.
these newer black characters look to her with reverence and have her, project that reverence. I think you're right. I think that there's a lot to look forward to in that respect.
Yeah, I
But I
mean
have,
it's
oh,
really
sorry, go ahead.
exciting. No, I think there's a bit of a delay, but yeah, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah, I do have a quick question though, because I know this is one of the topics that we're going to discuss. Marvel just released their Marvel Rivals game, and I know that there are a lot of characters in the game, and I haven't committed them all to memory. Is Storm in that game?
She is.
Okay.
There's people who have like complaints about like, sort of how to use her, but yeah, she's there.
Oh, great, great. So it's like you said before, video game medium is up there right alongside the comic medium in terms of getting characters out there in the mainstream and showing how important these characters are in the mainstream. So the fact that she's being featured in a game that's being heavily pushed right now, yeah, big things abound. Big things abound for Storm. So let's get into one of the aspects of our draft, which is how the people responded to the draft pick. And you'll be happy to know that as of now, we're dealing with 100% approval rating for Storm remaining black, and all 100% strongly approve. So give yourself a hand for a good pick.
I'm happy that we haven't the whitewashing whataboutism haven't gotten to the poll yet.
They have not infiltrated our polling. But listeners, this is where I start the hard sell on the fact that you can cast your vote in a number of places now. And on the social media site of your choosing, you can cast them on Twitter, you can cast them on Instagram, you can cast them on Threads, and you can also cast them on racialdraft.com. So, go ahead, go to racialdraft.com and, make your voice heard when it comes to each of the draft picks that are going to pop up over the course of the season. One of the things that we changed for this season, as compared to other seasons, is that the polls for the draft picks on the site remain open for the entire season. So you have,
Hmm.
they have the whole season to sell you on their picks and to convince you that you should approve of these picks. So, avail yourself of that. To the extent that there are backlashes, try to silence those backlashes with opinions of your own, positive opinions about these
Hmm.
reimaginings. Speaking of reimaginings, let's go into the second pick from the Native American delegation who drafted Peter Parker. Randy, I'll ask you first, what you thought when you heard about the pick.
I like it. Like I mean, it's we already know that Peter Parker is a everyman, so it's very easy for sort of anybody to kind of imagine themselves in that role.
For sure.
And it's nice whenever the white delegation gets one
I
snatched
mean,
out from under their
they're
feet.
getting a lot
Pretty sure
snatched
they
out
were hoping.
from under them for sure. But it's like you said. I think even Stan Lee mentioned that one of the keys to Peter Parker's popularity or Spider-Man popularity generally is he has that mask and costume
Hmm.
where his skin color's not available, not visible. So any kid, any young person who sees themselves in Peter Parker or Spidey character-wise doesn't have to overcome the visual pushback of, well, that can't be me because I don't have this right skin color. Once you put that costume
Right.
on, you can be anybody under that mask. And I think that I think that's historically been a huge part of the appeal of the character, because, we don't have to get into it, but Peter Parker's one of my favorite characters. And, the
Hmm.
fact that he's one of the coming of age characters. He became a superhero as a teenager, and he's always been trying to balance growing up with, becoming a fine young man with both the traumas of his past and all the stress of trying to be a superhero and trying to be there for his friends and family while,
Hmm.
he's not rich. He's not a billionaire. He doesn't have a butler. With super speed, he's going to be, sometimes he's got to be two places at once. And more
Yeah.
often than not, he's got to choose saving people and being a hero over looking out for number one. So I think that, there are a lot of overlaps, I think, when it comes to that feeling of pressure and putting and needing to be your best while also trying to stay good. And I think that, not to say that white people can't see themselves in the character. Of course they can. But I think that uniquely there's something about Peter Parker that people of color can see themselves. And I think that there were a lot of times that he could be race bent, and I think that particularly with the Native American delegation. While I fully admit that there's not a huge, community here in New York of Native Americans, I don't think that in and of itself is a reason to say that Peter Parker couldn't be Native American.
I mean, look, I if there is anybody who can identify with the media trying to brand them as a threat and or menace, I don't think that we have to go very far to sort of connect those dots. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we can put it that way, for sure. Um, So yes, right now, it's 80% approval rating, with 60% strongly approving, 20% somewhat approving, and 20% somewhat disapproving of Native American Peter Parker. We also got a fan cast. Are you familiar with the actor Farrell Lunatai?
Hmm.
Randy?
I am
Okay.
very, very handsome.
I mean, that too. But I mean, I've only seen him in Reservation Dogs, but he has a very likable quality. I think he can pull off that sort of Peter Parker energy of where, like, just like his character on the show would, occasionally would screw up, but mean well. I think that, like, he also sort of bridges that young man gap of where, like, yes,
Hmm.
he's still a kid, but you could tell that he's trying to step up and grow up. And, again, it's a coming
Hmm.
of age show. And Pete Parker's a coming of age character. So I definitely think that the Pharaoh Nakai is almost a perfect casting for Pete Parker in my eyes.
Hmm. I like it.
And the people mostly agree, 87.5% approval rating with all 87.5 strongly approving of the casting, and 12.5 somewhat disapproving. But there's still time, still a day, listeners. So if you're within the sound of my voice, head on down to your social media platform of your choice, cast your vote. And of course, like I said, you can always cast your vote on RachelDraft.com. We will move on to the third pick, which is a repeat pick, something that we've seen before from the Swan Mania delegation. I always feel like they're in a bit of a tough spot because of just, sort of geographical limitations.
Hmm.
Also, the the wide range of different cultures that are under the umbrella. But as far as like high profile characters, I really do like the Tony Stark character with the Swanamena, particularly when you consider his arc as a pardon the pun, his arc of being kind of like a weapons manufacturer, sees the error of his
Hmm.
ways, knowing that his weapons are doing harm halfway across the world. Particularly, I mean, in the in the early days of the character, that more meant in Asia, in kind of East and Southeast Asia. But in
Hmm.
recent years, that has meant, all the places now that we fight our wars, which is
Yeah.
in the Middle East. So
Yeah.
having had a warmonger or weapons manufacturer person who builds bombs and drones and other types of weapons of war, uh, seeing the horrors that are perpetrated over there, and actually having that character be someone of that background. I think that does add a powerful element to his story, to basically say, yes, I'm a genius. Yes, these are, I'm a man of tomorrow. I can see the future of technology, but I don't have to use my technology to harm people. I can use my technology to make the world a better place. I just think that that's and again, having already caused harm, knowing that he has a lot of work to do to kind of clear that to even
Hmm.
scales. Tony Stark, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I like him as a character, and I think that the years of Robert Downey Jr. portraying the character have increased his popularity. but I think that he's always been a character of a lot of depth and a lot of nuance. And having, and his character struggles a lot with inner demons. And because of, again, we talked about Peter Parker and we talked about how he's a bit more of an everyman, whereas Stark is more, he depends more to the side of excellence and exceptionalism. I
Hmm.
also think that there's a benefit in having a person of color that's excellent and exceptional, but still has its flaws. So, that's one of the reasons that I personally strongly approve of the pick. But what about you?
I can see it because when I think of sort of the idea of maybe parents who may have been immigrants, and they come to this country and try to figure out how can they sort of make themselves into pillars of society, right? Because like if you come here as an immigrant, they're going to look at you some kind of way, like, why are they here? Are they trying to sort of, take up our resources? We this conversation, it's really the conversation that we're seeing going on in our current climate. And so to see that maybe there will be some people who try to go along with what we perceive as like, ooh, the capitalist American dream. And then you sort of have a moment that snaps you back to reality. And it's like, well, maybe I should be truer to, my sort of initial moral compass of, what I understand to be right and wrong.
Yeah. And
So
especially,
I think that that's a respectable choice.
yeah, and especially, going into that, like you said, the first generation versus second generation immigrant
Mm-hmm.
aspect, the
Yep.
person who worked hard to assimilate and worked hard to achieve and get that
Right.
American dream. But as a result, their child grows up extra privileged. Their child grows up
Yeah.
extra disconnected from, the culture and like I said, I mean, I think you're right. I think that that is something that's happening now in immigrant groups where, for lack of a better term, they believe that they've transcended their race and their
Mm-hmm.
culture, only to realize that, maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah.
And there's a
Yeah.
moral cost. And there's a moral cost to believing that you've moved on to the dominant culture. So, like
Mm-hmm.
I said, having a hero that has continually grapples with his sins in the past and the people who can't bring back because of the decisions that he and his family made. It was said in I think one of the Avengers movies. These bombs have your name on them,
Yeah.
even more so than a bomb that was dropped by America. The bomb that was dropped by America that has your name on it. So
Yeah.
that profound sense of needing to make amends and atone for that harm. I think that's particularly resonant today. And should have mentioned the people approve to the tune of 80%, 60% strongly approve, 20% somewhat approve, and 20% somewhat disapprove. So that brings us to the number 4 pick, which, I was surprised this character stayed on board this long, but it made sense. The multiracial delegation got them a Superman, Clark Kent.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are a lot of ways that someone could be multiracial. So it is, remains to be seen exactly uh, the particular brew of mix of flavors, so to speak. But in terms of, we've talked about Superman before and how there's a little bit of the immigrant story, there's a little bit of the assimilation story, there's a little bit of
Mhm.
obviously the characters created by Jewish Americans. So there's a lot of Jewish story in Superman. But when you have the aspect of Krypton, it's, someone who um, is from a different world, who comes here and then gets ensconced in kind of traditional American values, for better for worse. Usually for better, but occasionally to the extent that I do still believe that he wouldn't be as potent of a symbol if he wasn't so able to assimilate in the larger
Mhm.
dominant culture. And, I think that that's what makes him particularly resonant in the the multiracial delegation, because he does have to bridge those worlds. He does have to bridge those cultures, whatever Krypton means and whatever we choose to have Krypton represent in a given story, but then also have to be just a plain old Kansan, plain old small town American.
I mean, Clark Kent as a light skinned biracial. I feel like it speaks to the culture. Like we got that's the demographic for star rappers and basketball players and football players. It's like, yeah, if you're looking for like the star, it's probably a light skinned biracial.
I
That's
mean,
correct.
he is next level passing.
Right.
Like, and that's the
He's
thing.
like, you can't trace back and be like, oh yeah, his mom is white and his dad is black. Yeah, like no, he's literally from a whole other extra planet.
Yeah, and truth is, like, and every culture can imagine, someone of that culture that is able to like get by in
Yeah.
in the white community by someone being like, I mean, I know you got like a little something going on in your eyes and nose, but I'm not really sure. Not really sure. I guess you're white. Guess maybe. And of course, obviously, Superman's having a moment right now. We last year we had
hmm
was it last year that we had a My Adventures with Superman? It was last year, was it?
Yeah, I think it premiered last year. I think so.
Yeah. No, no, no. We had 2 seasons of that, haven't we?
You may be right.
Yeah. But regardless, I think that the last season was last year, and then of course we've had the Superman and Lois show, which just ended, which was an amazing
hmm
show. And I think Tyler Hoechlin, I believe he's multiracial.
I believe so.
So there you go. Perfect example of.
I'm glad it's him and not Dean Cain.
Oh yes, yes, that's true.
Because like I think that's the last time we had a multiracial Superman. Dean Cain back in the '90s.
Well, that's a tough one. That's really tough. But but again, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying. Tyler Hoechlin is multiracial,
hmm
and
Yeah,
then
I mean, you literally you would like he very easily passes for white, but
yeah,
and I feel like he he did such a great job. Like literally, I think maybe my only genuine complaint about Tyler Hoechlin's, I think it was like the suit, maybe like the fit
yeah.
of the suit. That's about it. Other than that, I think he did an excellent job as Superman.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that in a lot of ways, he redefined the character even before James Gunn got the opportunity to do so.
hmm
And I mean, I'm happy that the show existed. We can all pour out a little bit for the Arrowverse and the legacy of the Arrowverse,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is finally the CW, superheroes on the CW, RIP 2024.
hmm
If a show had to be the swan song for that, I guess I
Yeah,
was happy with Superman and Lois you know.
yeah,
And then of
yeah.
course, like I said, 2025 is going to be when we get James Gunn's Superman, which means there'll be a trailer. The actual release of the movie will not fall within our season, but there'll be a whole bunch of hype in the lead up to it. And I'm sure that in the comics, there'll be a lot happening to push the character even further into the. I mean,
hmm
you can't really get more mainstream than Superman already, but
Yeah,
I'm sure there'll be time to have those conversations that we continue to have about how relevant Superman is in the current current climate.
yeah. He's not going anywhere because like even we have the Superman solo comic and we got Justice League Unlimited just came out and Action Comics I think still has like heavily Superman based content, Superman family. Yeah, he's and we could use it.
Yeah,
Right? Like, I mean, we could use
yeah, we exactly a hopeful Superman is definitely needed right now for sure.
yes.
And the listeners, they're shockingly perfectly okay with a multiracial Superman. 100% approval rating. 75% strongly approve and 25% somewhat approve of multiracial Superman. So, maybe we have, no, we haven't, transcended race.
Are you checking the site poll or are you checking the Twitter poll? We might get a bit of a different response from Elon's flying monkeys. We might have.
Sometimes the algorithm works in our favor. Clearly, clearly, certain people had not seen this, that pick in their team. So, it's the right kind of cult, the right kind of curation is what I'm saying. But listeners, feel free to continue to buttress the pick and continue to cast your vote in favor of multiracial Superman. Moving on, this one was I mean, well, we can get into it. This is from the the East Southeast Asian delegation, but they drafted to be East Asian Reed Richards. Now, ordinarily, I would be all on board for this pick because who better than Reed Richards to be Asian, considering the stereotypes and considering, just the need for more Asian representation.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're having a moment right now where Reed Richards is about to be thrust into the mainstream to an even higher degree
Mm-hmm.
through Pedro Pascal, who was a
Who
Latin,
is very not
yes,
Asian.
who was a Latin gentleman,
Correct.
and his casting, while it did spar some initial backlash, for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
people have really gotten on board with Pedro Pascal's
Yeah,
Reed
he's
Richards.
grown on people.
Yeah, I mean, like I would say he's done more than grown on people. I mean, before the casting, Reed Richards has been a controversial figure that a lot of people didn't rock with. But I think that the love for Pedro Pascal has led to people really kind of getting into the daddy of it all. And
I think that's fair.
so I think that's a tough act to follow for the East Southeast Asian delegation in terms of trying to claw back Reed Richards from the Latin delegation. So, good luck.
I
Obviously,
mean, Carlos has plenty of time to challenge, does he not? Or are we past that point?
well, that's the thing. The challenge, he doesn't really have standing to challenge because, technically in the books, Reed Richards is white, but he can try to, engineer a trade. He can try to, he's got the whole season to try to get Reed Richards, put a trade package together, offer some other characters, over to try to get Reed Richards on their side. And I think,
I
because
mean, he has to get back at the East and Southeast Asian delegation. He has to be like, I want Shang-Chi.
we don't want that kind of tit for tat, but it could happen. Could happen, so yeah, again, this is the first round, so there's a lot of room for machinations. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to have them both on the podcast and have them hash it out, hash it out right live on the podcast, work a trade. But in the meanwhile, we'll see how it plays out. However, again, putting aside the Pedro Pascal of it all, back before he was cast, this guy
Mm-hmm.
was one of my fan cast, Stephen Yeun, and, who you might know as Glenn from The Walking Dead, or from Beef, or from briefly being cast in a Marvel movie and then, leaving it. So he hasn't yet to be cast in Marvel. But I like Stephen Yeun. I think he's a really good actor, and I think that he would make a fine Reed Richards. But he's not.
I mean, Reed Richards is another one who had kind of like a Peter Parker effect where everybody was like just across the whole melanin spectrum. They were fan casting some of everybody. They were
Yeah,
like,
you're right. That would,
oh, Raul Coley or Stephen Young or Sindel Ramamurthy. Like the guy, dang it, I forgot that man's name. The one who ended up playing the telepath character in
oh,
he's
yes, yes.
he's
William
on a good
Harper,
place
is
for
that
his
his
start,
name?
right?
Something Harper?
I believe so. Yes. I'm like they're fan casting some of everybody, and I'm like, okay, well, like clearly y'all are okay with the race band.
I mean, I think it was more that everyone likes like a little bit. Everyone's got a little affinity for Mr. Fantastic, even though he's a complicated figure. So they're like,
Yeah.
a really smart guy who's a little bit of a dick. I feel like we've got one of those,
Mhm.
So, but yes, I buried the lead. 100% approval rating currently for East Asian Reed Richards. So good on them.
Mhm.
66.6 or 60.7 rather. Strongly approve and 33.3 somewhat approve. Um, with Stephen Young, on the other hand, 88.9% approval rating, with all
Mm.
88.9 strongly approving and 11.1 somewhat disapproving. But still, that's still pretty good. Still very good, actually, in terms of approving of this pick for the East Southeast Asia delegation. Now we're in the back half of the round, and who better to lead off the back half than Dick Grayson? Get it? But yeah, the white delegation decided that they needed to snatch some dick, and they went ahead and did so. You know, this is tough. Obviously, traditionally, he has been depicted as white. In recent years, I'm not sure exactly when this element was introduced to his character, but in recent years, his Romani heritage, being
I think in maybe the early 2000s they said something about it, like kind of offhandedly,
okay,
and then recently Tom Taylor,
expounded
like,
upon it.
right, he cemented it and was like, I guess one of the parents is Romani, so he's only half or
Okay.
something like that.
Well, I definitely know that in some depictions, he's got a little bit more tint to his skin.
Mm-hmm.
I read the webtoons, the Wayne family
Yep.
webtoons, and he's got a little brown to him. Obviously, this is not Romani, but when he was on Harley Quinn, he was brown as well. He was played by Harvey Guillen there. I think that the door has been opened to something other than a plain white dick. And,
Mm-hmm.
sadly, the white delegation said no more of that. We want to make sure that we keep it for ourselves. So they, good on them, I guess, for keeping a tight grip of their debt. The people right now are at 75% approval rating of the pick, and they also provided a fan cast. You might know him as the good actor who plays Shazam, Asher
Mm-hmm.
Angel, and the approval rating there is 83.4, 83.3, whatever, rounded. I guess now's as good as any name to talk about the other actor who played Shazam, and he is definitely passing his lot with the white delegation, so to speak.
He is absolutely making a white dick of himself.
Yeah, for sure. But listen, as far as talking about, the character himself, very underrated character. For a character that
Mm-hmm.
has has he has appeared in movies, but he hasn't appeared in movies, for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, but he's everywhere else. He's in the video games. He's all over the animated series. He's,
Mm-hmm.
he's been, and he's anchored a television show, fan art, Teen Titans, just the Titans,
Yeah.
Titans forever. Anything Titans, he's the face of the Titans, and he kind of has a little bit of that Spider-Man in him, in the sense of he
Mm-hmm.
started out as a kid, and now he's a young adult, and he gets all the romances. He's a sex symbol. I think that as big of a deal as Dick Grayson is, he could probably even be a bigger deal, if we're being honest.
I agree. I agree. The only thing that's really holding him back is just DC's kind of hierarchical way of how they handle which characters get, pushed or what have you. But yeah, I feel like if anybody over on DC's side could sort of organically feel like that, it's Grayson and Wally West are kind of like just the top two that spring to mind.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I feel like if we're talking only about the comics, I feel like Dick Grayson's already
Hmm.
done it. I feel like he's already gotten bigger than even other members of the Justice League.
I
Normally that's impossible. Normally you have to be in the
Yeah,
Justice League to.
that is peak bat privilege.
That's exactly what it
Because
is.
that is peak bat privilege. But at the same, like, okay, so the feeling is that yes, he has the fact that he was adopted by Bruce Wayne. He could very much have been the rich playboy that kind of was lofty away from it. Like, even though Bruce Wayne, deep down beneath all of that is not really this sort of carefree guy, Dick Grayson had the option to be that. He had the potential to be that. Of course, there was the conditioning to be Robin and what have you, but still, he could have fallen by the wayside. And the fact that he did not, it speaks a lot to his character.
Oh yeah, for sure. I
It,
mean,
it
just the
very
fact,
much so.
I mean, whoever wrote in the idea that, he needed to go out on his own and outgrow Robin and then
Yeah,
transition into Nightwing, one of the best things ever, one of the best decisions ever for a comic book character.
absolutely.
Because Robin was
Absolutely.
so popular and he was locked in that zone, but you can't be a little kid forever. Having a 25-year-old Robin would have would have really hamstrung his development. And having both in character in universe, but then out of character. I mean, the Nightwing look, the Nightwing costume, it's an awesome costume. It feels like the right kind of leveling up. When you're like, all
Hmm.
right, yeah, I mean, I was a kid and you put me in these wacky, you put me in these wacky situations, but now I'm going to find
Yeah.
my own self. And even the fact that, a name like Nightwing seems like it would be extra broody. I think the best depictions of Nightwing, the best depictions of Dick Grayson as Nightwing are not super broody. They're,
Yeah.
one of the things I knock about Titans is that they lean too heavily into broody Dick Grayson because I think he's a better character when he's like, yeah, of course I have my pathos, but in reality, I was the guy going, holy, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was the guy
Yeah.
bringing the
Right.
light out of
Exactly.
Bruce Wayne. I was the guy cracking the jokes. Again, I make the Spider-Man analogy. Like, I'm the guy who tries to get you off, get you off your game with quips. Like, Batman's not
Hmm.
quippy, I'm quippy. So to have him
Yeah.
be the, like, dark and brooding, but also quippy, acrobatic, flippy, I think that's another aspect of why his character works.
Yeah. And honestly, like, there are some people who are like they were really into Dick Grayson as Batman, like as sort of the end of his arc, and I fully agree with you. I think that he is better in that sort of, it just feels more realistic, right? Like him as Nightwing, he acknowledges, yes, I had this traumatic past. Yes, I worked in Gotham, I worked in Bloodhaven, these really horrible situations that I find myself in, but that's not gonna drag me down. He has his kind of angry moments, but he's not overall, sort of, I guess his trauma hasn't visibly left as much evidence on him
Yeah,
as Bruce Wayne. Like if you talk to Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson, it's like, one clearly has been more deeply informed by their trauma in sort of a insular and serious and stoic way, and the other one sort of knows how to
yeah.
contextualize it a bit more.
And in a way, I would say that that's actually a victory for Bruce Wayne as a
Hmm.
character.
Yeah.
Because if his whole motivation for taking on Robin, taking on Dick Grayson as his ward, as his son, was to basically say, I see myself in you and I want better for
Hmm.
you. Having raised him up to be the man who can be Batman in terms of his skill set, but doesn't
Hmm.
feel compelled to be Batman the same way that Bruce feels compelled to be Batman. Dick Grayson can be. Remember, there was the whole thing about how Black Cat said, if you're happy, you can't be the best Batman you can be.
Yeah.
Dick Grayson is under no such illusions. Dick Grayson can
Hmm.
have it all, and I think that that's also a good aspect of his story. That if there was ever anyone that could actually be Batman, but like not be as evil, you know,
I mean, yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, Dick Grayson is the one, and he would gladly step in if he needed to, but he doesn't
Hmm.
feel like it's any validation of his legacy to pick up the
Right.
mantle.
Right. Right.
And bringing it back to what you were saying before with Wally West, I think that there's much more of a tension between
Hmm.
Wally needing to be the Flash, needing to prove
Right.
that he has to pick up Barry's mantle.
I agree. He really looked up to Barry. Basically, they grew up together in sort of like more of a, I guess Wally was kind of codependent. Not quite, but like sort of, because Wally's parents were pretty awful. Like
Hmm.
they were just always like arguments and fights and stuff, and just other things, which and so he spent a lot of time with his aunt Iris, right? And then he really latched on to Barry. Not at first. It was mostly just Iris, but then after they got powers, after Wally got powers, he's like, now we have more of a kinship, because yes, you and I are both close to Iris, but you're kind of the only one I can speak to in terms of being this superhuman. So yeah, it developed less into like me becoming my own person. Yes, he becomes his own person, but it's he's very, very, very conscious. He's very aware of the legacy that Barry is setting before him.
Right.
Even after he is bypassed Barry by far in terms of like feats and all this other stuff, he's, established his family, wife, kids, blah, 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 which again, Barry has never done.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that there's two other beneficial complicating factors. One of them is that, Batman does treat being Batman like a burden, like something he's taken on, a crusade that he's taken on that he believes he's probably, that's probably going to kill him. It's fine, that's what he's compelled to do, but it's not a life that
Yeah.
he wants for anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
The Flash
Yeah.
is not that. I mean, like Barry doesn't look at being the Flash that way, therefore he didn't instill that.
I mean, it's almost like it's almost like you sort of clocking in to work, like it's just because he encountered like so many of his adventures are a lot of the same rogues over and over again.
Sure.
And that is like, Batman kind of has that too, but the rogues have kind of almost like this sort of repartee back and forth. They're almost like having conversations and stuff with each other. So yeah, it's very much that there's more of a sort of adventurousness to it, as opposed to the brooding tone and the sort of fighting against hopelessness.
Right. And then of course there is that whole like Flash family thing. I mean, there's a Batman family
Yes.
too, but there's a whole like, hey, we run together, different
Hmm.
generations and different other speedsters, and it's a good time. We're having a good time.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
imagine like the people in the Flash family like barbecuing every week, like
We have seen multiple times where they have barbecued. Right, yes, they got like family photos and stuff of each other. Yes, a lot of them are like actually related.
yeah,
So
that too.
yeah, yeah.
So it is different, and I think that weirdly enough, we'll get into it when I'm sure when the character gets drafted, but Flash hasn't really been given a lot of. Well, that's not true. We had the TV show on the CW, but there's still a lot of room to truly flesh out in the mainstream what the Flash represents, and
Well, right. You would feel more, I think that it would be better cemented if you actually had a feature that focused on Wally West.
hmm,
Like you got Barry Allen, and it's true, he has, Iris, his wife, he has kids, but we got a lot of like the sort of sad boy feelings.
mhm.
I don't know. It's just something that there is a stark difference between Barry sort of getting his start and then how Wally got his start. Barry, I don't know. They borrowed some stuff from Wally in order for us to get the Barry that we saw on the CW.
Okay, you're talking about in the show, yes, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing that we should definitely mention, because DC has those kind of weird continuity quirks where
Hmm.
there's different iterations of the multiverse, different iterations of the universe. So Wally got the benefit of, from a storytelling standpoint, his mentor died, and he had to
Hmm.
step into those shoes, perhaps before he was ready, and he had to show and prove that he could fill those shoes. It's gotten more complicated now that Barry's back, I mean, it's just very convoluted storytelling wise to say, oh yeah, you had these years that you were the Flash, you had a family, you grew into your own, but none of that happened anymore. He's back, and now he's the more experienced Flash, but also back from the dead. I'm not, it's hard to reconcile those two stories. Like if you were gonna tell,
Yeah, I
if you're
mean,
gonna tell a Wally West
he
story, like
right.
you're sort of stuck.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I feel that when Barry came back, I'm talking about the comics now.
Mhm.
When Barry came back, the writers sort of did like an overcorrect, which you didn't really have to do that. I mean, you have Barry coming back from the dead. That means that he has years to catch up on in terms of like where are his Justice League, fellow members and stuff, like just his status quo with them. They've moved on and he has to kind of catch up with that. I mean, I did the reading a while back, so may not remember it, but I don't feel like that was explored as deeply as it ought to have been. They tried to like just jump back to things were how they were. Great, we have Barry now. You know, it very much made sense in my mind that they would kind of have Wally sort of catching Barry up, right? Like maybe he's almost the equivalent of like trying to help somebody who's been in prison for a while, like helping them
Yeah,
try
yeah.
to adjust back to the world, as it is, as it's changed in their absence. So, they could have done that and had it more where Wally sort of moved away from quite so much idolizing Barry to now being that sort of shoulder that he leaned on. And they kind of didn't. They just wanted to have them be on equal footing because, this person likes Barry Allen
Well, my
and this
theory.
person also doesn't like sidekicks.
So my theory is that, the success, relatively so, of the Flash TV show, plus the ramping up to the Flash movie, which, didn't happen the way they wanted it to happen, led to
Yeah.
them saying, we really want to hard focus back on Barry Allen as the Flash. And,
Hmm.
we'll take Wally off the board for a little while. We'll bring him back, but we'll take him off the board for a
Yeah.
while so that we can focus on the mechanics of the core Barry Allen, Iris West
Hmm.
story, and really kind of get back to uh, establishing establishing the way things kind of used to be. And I think that that was a bit of a misstep. I mean, again, I understand why they wanted to do that because they wanted to
Hmm.
align, the idea that, after so many years of Barry Allen being dead and you know, not having a place in the world. They wanted to give him a
Yeah.
place as fast as possible and not do this. Like I said, if they didn't have these other factors that they were pushing, that probably would have been a better way to go for the comics long term because it would have
Yeah.
established that, Wally's still the primary Flash, but Barry's trying to find his place in the world.
Yeah, I think that is sort of going back to the hierarchical nature of DC. Cause, again, like their setting, their sort of backdrop is the fandom imagination. Like you don't have physical space to say, well, he doesn't really fit here. Like, no, you can find room if you
I
want
mean,
to. Like,
I
it's
mean, I
not,
hear you, but
obviously the room is not infinite, but it at least there, I feel like is not infinite, but there's more room than they seem to believe that they have. I'll just put it that
yeah,
way.
I mean, I agree with that. But I mean, again, tying it back to Dick Grayson, where we started, the reason that I think that Dick Grayson works so well is that his story isn't, and then he becomes Batman, you know?
Hmm.
And therefore, there's no need for a story where Dick Grayson has to give up the cowl in order for Bruce Wayne to return to his rightful role.
Right.
Inherent in any story where where Dick Grayson is dressed as Batman or even acting as Batman, inherent in that story is I'm keeping it warm until it's like, so like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not my end game. This is not what I want for my life. I'll do it if I
Right.
have to, but this is not who I want to be. And because of the fact that Wally, like, was training, it would almost be better if Wally had his version of Nightwing, had his version of this is the speedster identity that better embodies me and what I stand for rather than always saying I need to show that I'm the Flash. The
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, I agree. He's way outgrown any need to sort of prove himself at all. He's way like I mean because we have people who still remember him as the Flash from Justice League, the cartoons and stuff. I mean, there was room there, setting aside the fact that certain editors and stuff were like, I don't like sidekicks, I don't like blah 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 characters. But I mean, the potential was still there. And even now, since they both share the role, like my biggest complaint is I need them to like make sure that they're more consistent in terms of how they portray them. Cause like sometimes they like will mix up and say, oh yeah, this is supposed to be Wally West. And they got
Yep.
Barry Allen costume and stuff. Like, I mean, a lot of people sort of get upset at the Flash, the I think it was a Rebirth era Flash costume that had the open hair
Hmm.
cowl and stuff. But I'm like, y'all gotta physically distinguish them somehow.
Yeah, because at
Cause
least
for
the open
some
hair,
reason,
at least you know what you
right.
always know. It's Wally if his hair's out,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. You can have like, some other changes to the costume to sort of, make it look better or whatever, but you got to have something to physically distinguish them because if they look, if oh well his costume is like crimson and this other one is burgundy. Like ain't no artist looking at them like that. Come on now, be for real. Like be realistic.
Yeah,
You have to give something to more distinguish them, and hopefully some writer, creative team, what have you, comes along and finds out how to sort of give us that Peter Parker or Miles Morales, they're both Spider-Man, how can they make it work and still both of them be relevant?
yeah. I mean, but it's hard because, you even have, like you had mentioned, now what they've done is they've made Wally a family man.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, making him a family man grows him up, like,
Yeah.
beyond Barry.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And they don't like they want to have Barry still because like okay, so the sad part is it sort of grows Wally up in this sort of moral way too, like this unspoken moral way. Because you have Wally there, wife, kids, blah blah blah, and you have Barry with, but you also have Impulse there. Impulse is his grandson,
From the
meaning
future.
that
Yeah.
Barry is still a deadbeat dad. His kids are somewhere in the future having their lonely orphaned adventures while the son, the grandson of Barry Allen, is living his best life. And it's like,
I mean, well, that's the funny
wow.
thing. The funny thing is that every time I see their future children, nobody cares about them.
Yeah, they don't like you like
They don't
anytime you
rate.
have leaving right, you don't have them show up in any of the like little group speedster photos, and Lord knows we have an abundance of group speedster photos. We have like they have like communicated with people in the future across the multiverse. The Tornado Twins ain't getting none of that love.
No,
They're stuck.
not at all.
The red haired, literally red-haired unwanted children.
Right.
So yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it's very weird. It's like he's the patriarch, well, a patriarch of the Flash family, but like he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have all of the markers of what you would consider the patriarch to have.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a tough. Again, we will definitely get into it again when these characters get drafted because it's going to be interesting to see what the demographics or what delegations scoop them up and how they make that fit in their family models. So yeah, we'll see how we'll table that discussion for later, because I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Flash family, Barry Allen, Wally West,
Hmm.
interact with different, potentially different racial backgrounds. But yeah, let's keep it moving to the seventh pick. There's not a lot to say about it because we haven't heard a lot from this delegation, and given the mythological aspects, Wonder Woman, South Asian,
Hmm.
that's a little different for sure.
Yeah.
Given that traditionally the mascara has kind of a kind of a Greek mythological bent.
Hmm.
I mean, South Asia is not that far from Greece. um,
I mean, Zeus has.
yeah, he's
I'll put it nicely. He has those in different area codes. He's gotten around,
for
so
sure.
I'm not too thrown off by any racial casting for Wonder Woman.
I mean, that is definitely fair. And of course, South Asians do range as far as their complexion
Hmm.
goes. So, a little tint here, a little tint there, and you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's not too much, too big of a stretch in terms of the visual representation of the character. Like I said, more from a cultural side, obviously Themyscira
Hmm.
isn't really part of any true culture. It's got its own.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room to play. Obviously, the World War I origin of the character
Hmm.
um, is something that could be played with. I'm not exactly sure what was happening in that part of the world in World War I. I should have done my research, but it was in Europe and Asia, so she could have emerged and she could have helped out in that part of the world.
Hmm.
So again, I think it's a wide, empty canvas that could be imprinted on, and I don't think it undercuts the character in any significant
Yeah.
way.
I'm sure that there's some sky deity from that region of the world, or I mean, we got the Well of Souls, if I'm not mistaken. It reincarnates women from all around the world, right? So I feel like there's a lot of room to play around and kind of figure out how you want to recontextualize and still not take away from the base of who the character is.
Well, and then of course, remember, I mean, obviously we have the Zeus element, but then we also have the molded from clay element. If we're in the molded from
Hmm.
clay element, then there's no reason
Yeah,
that there's no reason
exactly.
that Wonder Woman couldn't be portrayed by women of any background.
Hmm.
So for that reason, I guess I'm not shocked that we're at 100% approval rating for South Asian Wonder Woman. 87.5% approval rating. I'm strongly approve, and 12.5 somewhat approve for 100% approval rating. And again, listeners,
And it really is no wonder.
now this was a little shocking to me. Maybe it's just because of this actress, the fan cast of Priyanka Chopra Jonas, who is still one of the most beautiful women in the world.
Hmm.
So on that front, I have no complaint. But apparently a polarizing figure because as of now, only a 50% approval rating for Priyanka Chopra Jonas in the role, with 50% strongly approving, 7% somewhat disapproving, 49.1, sorry, 49.9, so 42, there we go. That's the math. 7.1% somewhat disapprove, and 42.9 strongly disapproving of Priyanka Chopra Jonas.
Well, I don't know if I agree. I think I need copious amounts of video evidence, photo evidence
Are
of
you saying
Priyanka
you need to see
Chopra.
her in the costume?
Yes.
Yes, I too would concur. If anyone that's got a they put a word out
If you
to.
see my internet history it's trying to look her up, that's purely for science.
I was just gonna openly put it out there. Anyone that's got insight and can ask her to do like a photo shoot of her wearing a Wonder Woman costume for science. For science.
For research.
Exactly. You know, it was that solid, Priyanka. It was that solid. But yeah. I mean, I'm not really sure of what's happening there. But stay tuned there, listeners. Maybe if you have some insights, share them. This is a good.
Unless one of y'all get the bright idea to try to do this by AI renderings, that's not
See,
welcome.
I was gonna put that into the universe. But yeah, this is a good time for me to mention that racial draft podcast at gmail.com is our email address. If you have longer form thoughts, then you can just fit on a comment, or on a social media page. Go ahead and hit us there. But we will move on from South Asian Wonder Woman to Jewish Wolverine. I was unaware of the history of Jewish people in Canada until recently, but apparently Jewish people have been in
Hmm.
Canada since like the 1700s. So good on them. And yeah, James Logan Howlett, Wolverine, he of the convoluted backstory, he of the adamantium claws and the short king wizardry, anger management issues. What else? What else?
I feel like if Kate Pride can be a ninja, then Logan can be a samurai. It works. I mean, it calls into question maybe his powers activated after circumcision, but
The
other than
healing
that, I
factor.
think I
I was
feel like it would have.
Yeah, I was gonna make a circumcision via clause joke, but your joke works a lot better. That's but no, I'm here for it though. I mean, again, like I mentioned, the short king with anger issues, like there definitely there's definitely some Jewish people in mind to portray Wolverine. Uh,
Lovingly.
Harry too. Oh yeah, yeah, we're cooking gas. And speaking of, the Jewish delegation provided a fan cast. Daniel Radcliffe, who was not famous for anything, right? Like, he were
Who's that?
another.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, there have been quite a number of people who fan cast him as Logan at one point or another, and
Yeah.
so I like it. I think it definitely works because again, this is an actor that is in dire need of an IP role where he can become,
He's one step away from the poorhouse.
like, I mean, I just want him to be associated with a character that is beloved. He's important.
He's will act for food.
But yeah, as of now, 100% approval rating for Jewish Wolverine. That's how we know Elon's Twitter did not uh, get this in the algorithm.
Right.
But as 85.7% approval rating for Daniel Radcliffe as Logan. And that's 71.4 strongly approve, 14.3 somewhat approve, and 14.3 somewhat disapprove. So for me, the fan casting has definitely gone over well. And that brings us to, I gotta be honest, confounding pick, most confounding pick of the round. And that would be our guy, Carlos, representing the Latin delegation, and Victor Von Doom. Where do we begin? Where do we begin with Latino
I think
Victor Von?
the only way that you could make this a worse fan casting is if you put Robert Downey Jr. in the role. That's what I feel. Because I mean it's just funny because like you can understand to a degree like he's showing up in stuff. I mean he just recently became the Sorcerer Supreme.
Yeah, there's a huge Doom
So
based
that
event
definitely
coming.
right.
Yeah,
There's gonna be an event, and it's honestly like it's gonna be more than just the event, right? Because Doom is a big name.
for sure.
So I'm sure that anybody who is allowed to do so is going to be like, I want to try to write my character's interaction with Doctor Doom,
Hmm.
whatever. So I get it from that point, but
Yeah,
I feel like
I
that
get
was
it from I want this character to score points for my.
right. It feels like there was maybe because I mean Carlos he was saying that he was kind of stumped. I think it might have been like he might have been like kind of busy with other stuff and was trying to quickly come up with something
No, you know what I think
and
it
you know
was. I think Carlos was like, I want the highest degree of difficulty. I've picked all these other characters before, and this is an opportunity to pick a character that I've never had before. And that character also happens to be getting a major push, but doesn't change the fact that he's from a country called Latveria, and very much is tied in to I mean, obviously Latveria is not a real country, but it is a stand-in for an Eastern European aristocratic country that has roots that go back centuries. I mean, it's basically Transylvania.
I mean, now as far as like the casting is concerned, that would be super difficult, especially if you're still trying to keep the Romani part in mind, which I highly doubt, sadly. But still, you could at least have kind of the again sort of the immigrant aspect of it, because you could be like, okay, well, his family came from so and so other country to Latveria for some reason, and they were persecuted, and but he sort of rose up the ranks and became this powerful guy. I mean, you could kind of make
Yeah,
it work.
but that's the Romani story.
Right.
That's
There's
not
a
the
right.
Latino story.
Right.
Like it's
There's a lot of
the minute
stretching
he
that you have to
starts
do to make
talking
that work.
Spanish,
Right.
like
I
it's
think
it's a
that
tough
part of
one.
the thought process. I think part of the thought process was I wanted to get Reed and I couldn't get Reed, so I'm going to get his arch rival
I mean,
instead.
I think if oh, I don't think that's a trade that could work. I don't because I'm not sure East Asian Doom is that
No, it
much better.
absolutely couldn't. Absolutely not.
I'm not sure East Asian. I mean, the only way that any of these things could work is if we never saw the man under themselves.
Well, that too, and I feel like the only trade that you would really like, because if anybody has the claim to it, if I'm not mistaken, Romani people descend from South Asian ancestry or South
I
Asian
mean,
heritage. So
they're
I think, you know,
they're a mixed people with roots in
mhm,
South Asia. Yeah,
right,
so the
right.
multiracial
So
delegation could
yeah,
also get in
right.
there.
Them, well, of course, the skeleton key
Yeah,
delegation,
of course. And of
but
course,
I feel like,
and
yeah, they,
white privilege,
yeah,
because let's be honest,
yeah.
when people talk,
Because every portrayal of Doctor Doom and every fan casting of Doctor Doom up until this point has been a Caucasian,
yeah,
and not in the geographic sense.
I was about to make that point. I was about to say that despite everything that we said, any
Mm-hmm.
old white man will do. I mean, we just talked about it with Robert Downey Jr. You just gotta be
Yeah,
white. And
yeah,
so many people
yeah.
say, well, that's the perfect Doctor Doom cast. What makes it perfect?
Right. Is it really? Are you sure?
What makes Mads Mikkelsen the perfect Doctor Doom cast? He's from like
Yeah, yeah.
Scandinavia.
I'm like
He's not even
the
Eastern European.
right. It's not even from the right part. But like, I mean, I had you know, there's people who really like, I guess people think that like being racist against Romani people is like acceptable just because they're not like a huge demographic. But I mean, yeah,
Well, I mean, sadly,
there's people who will
being
hard down
racist
argue.
against Romani people
Right,
is very mainstream
right.
in Europe.
They will really like argue you down and be like, well, can you name 5 famous Romani? I'm like, no, I can't. I think that's probably the point. Let's get some more Romani people in the roles. Like that's a problem.
Yeah.
You see where, right.
I
So I
mean, and I would
mean,
draw,
that's
and that's the thing. I would draw a distinction, because I think there is a distinction to be drawn. I think that if you're from America and you don't have a lot of exposure to Romani people,
hmm
and you're ignorant about who Romani
hmm
people are and how to better or how to well represent Romani culture, I think that that's
hmm
one argument, so to speak, for
yeah,
look. I don't really know. I don't know Romani people. I don't know Romani actors. I don't know Romani culture. I don't know how to depict that. Therefore, I
right.
won't. I
Yeah,
think that's
sadly.
one. I think that's one flavor of what complicates these things. But then I also think that in Europe, Romani people are not
Hmm.
well liked.
Well,
And
right. They have the same exposure to Romani people that white people in South Africa have to black people, which is that they're horrible, terrible, and blah blah blah.
yes,
Like, I mean, it requires that somebody, in my mind, it requires that somebody from the outside kind of says, let me put this in context. Let me, I mean, there has to be some effort. Like, obviously,
but
we can't
I mean,
hash that out, but
just to sort of finish my point, I was just saying that,
hmm
like, you know, that complicates matters too, because if you want to cast someone from a particular country, they don't want Romani people
yeah,
from those. And it's like, we're going to cast
yeah.
the Eastern European Romani person. And then they're like, no, you, the hell you will.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy because I mean if you like the character then that's who they are. But yeah, I mean that's just it's such a sad overarching conversation because we get it all the time where it's like, the fans of anime kind of whitewash their portrayal of who these anime characters are. And that's why you have so many of them who are freaking racist as crap. Yeah, I love Naruto Uzumaki, but he's blonde haired and blue eyed and
Yeah.
so he's essentially a Caucasian. Like you can and where you have people arguing about how it's fine if Storm is light skinned or it's fine if John Stewart is light skinned or whatever. And I mean
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It
I
really
mean,
is.
it for sure is. And again, um, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that a lot of these characters, when they were conceived, attitudes towards
Hmm.
Romani people were not favorable to the point that they didn't
Yeah.
even use that word. They used the word that was more of a slur, and they
Yeah.
used it in order to give those characters the elements, because they were villainous characters. They used that
Hmm.
to give them those swarthy negative connotations that we,
Right.
would ordinarily say we don't want in these characters. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's kind of it's not quite like with the Ancient One, where it was like a character based on a stereotype, and you can
Hmm.
almost see why reinventing the character to remove the stereotype involves whitewashing the character. You can almost see you can almost see why someone would be moved to do that.
But in the case of Doctor Doom or Pietro or Wanda Maximoff, as they got to be more popular, suddenly they became whiter, or they were never really given their accurate skin tone in the first place.
Right.
You know.
So, I mean, and that's why, I mean, that's why there is so much pushback, because
Hmm.
Doom is, even though we hardly see his face, the
Yeah.
couple times that when they talk about his face, they make it sound like,
Hmm.
oh, he's such an attractive man. He's under
Hmm.
that mask before he got scarred. And of course that means
He's so white.
he's a very attractive white man.
Yeah. Yep.
And kudos to artists in Marvel nowadays, and kudos to the people who depicted Wanda Maximoff in Rivals, Marvel Rivals, because they definitely
Hmm.
put some tint on her. You know,
Yeah.
Wanda Maximoff is looking more Blacksimoff. You know,
Yeah, and I feel like there is, I don't know. Honestly, I'm sort of shocked by the turn because there is so much precedent to say, well, there are light-skinned Romani people and she's always looked white, but for some reason they just and it was after she had debuted in the MCU, so it's not like they had, continued some prior precedent. It literally happened after she had debuted, and I think it may have been like leading up to she was almost about to debut in Multiverse of Madness. I think it was prior to that
no,
she showed up in the comics and
it
they
was
started.
definitely prior to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's like she had started now having this sort of swarthier, visibly swarthier skin tone, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
I mean, they
I'm
tried
happy
it.
they kept it.
They even tried it with Pietro, but it didn't stick. Um,
Yeah,
and and I think part of the issue with Pietro, we talked about this before, is that a lot of his history has been drawing him as like a younger Magneto.
yeah,
So there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more of a history of when people close their eyes and imagine what Quicksilver looks
yeah.
like his look is a lot more static. Whereas Wanda, you know,
The only ones who have genuinely tried to you know go that extra mile in terms of his melanin are the Steve Orlando's creative team for Scarlet Witch. I think that's about it.
right. And that's
Everybody
more of
else
a,
has kind of
and that's
been
probably more of just of an issue of like they're twins, right? Like,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and then, also with the Quicksilver solo, who I mean, I know Saladin Ahmed wrote it. I believe
Right.
Saladin
Right.
Ahmed
Right.
wrote it,
Yes.
but I don't remember who illustrated it. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, those depictions are few and far between. And I think I
Mm-hmm.
think that's even more of an uphill climb in terms of
And
depicting.
we got in X-Men 97, we got he was paler than he was like
Yeah,
they went in the opposite direction.
yeah. He
Like,
ran
dang, you didn't even give him a tan. Y'all
he
like
ran all the
made him
way
look
out of the melanin.
he was pallid. Good God.
But yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, I mean, we'll get to it when that character comes up too. When Wanda comes up. It's this the Romani aspect. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a tough circle to square. Um,
Yeah.
because of both the history of having people view visually a character, but then
Mm-hmm.
also not knowing how to actually, in the storyline sense, portray the heritage without falling into some harmful stereotypes. But all that is
Yeah.
to bring it back around to Doom is none of those stereotypes. So I'm very curious about how this will be made to work. And I will continue to tease
I
Carlos
mean,
about season.
yeah, at least he'll be able to have a browner skin tone. I mean, if nothing else, we will at least get a browner, swarthier Doom.
I mean, he's gonna not wear the mask. I mean, that's the other thing. Like,
Right.
can we get a
That's
we get a Latino
especially
redesign?
it.
Can we get a Latino redesign of Doom? Like, what are we doing? So
Maybe the Doom mask is like now the Dia de los Muertos skull.
yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking. Dumos Dila de los Dumos. I don't know. I'll workshop it. I'll workshop it. We'll get something together. Yo soy Doom. But that brings us to the final pick of the round from the Polynesian delegation, the defending champion Polynesian delegation, and Jean Grey, Phoenix. She's
Yep,
also experiencing the
yep.
glow up of late.
Hmm.
She's got a solo book, but she's not showing up as much as Storm is. But
Yeah, she still is sort of clinging to the mutant and cosmic realm.
yeah, but very popular character.
Hmm.
Has really, I think that they've actually put a lot of effort in recent years into making her more than just Scott's love interest or the woman
Yep,
that dies every couple
yep.
years. We can't contain your power. You're so powerful. We have to kill you. Rope.
I mean, it lasted for 30 some odd years. That's a good long time. It's proven that it worked. And I'm very happy that they're moving on. They're letting her live in her power, and like we're getting sort of the silver surfery thing that it works very well how they've decided to go in my mind.
Yeah, and they've moved away, hard move away from the whole like Professor X wanted to take you under her
Yep.
wing in more ways than
Yep.
one.
Yep.
Like it. Yeah, I'm very curious as to. I mean, I think that this is a character that's going to be on the upswing, particularly once. I mean, who knows what direction we'll go with regard to a fan cast for
Hmm.
I mean not a fan cast. I mean I meant a real cast, MCU cast. But in the meanwhile, we can still play with our fan cast and Polynesian delegation, and perhaps get themselves a Polynesian, a Jean Grey, Polynesian Phoenix,
Hmm.
until we're confronted with the reality that they'll probably find another white girl.
I mean, honestly, there's room for melanin in like most of the '05. I think the only one who would be unbelievable as somebody with melanin maybe is Warren. I think he's probably like the only, like Angel would probably be the only one who would like sort of raise hackles in terms of my own mind.
Yeah, he's the one that is the most privilege coded.
Yeah, yeah,
So even if he were, let's say, multiracial, he'd still have to be white passing, uh, because
right.
what we're meant to understand about Warren is that the only thing stopping him from being like the most privileged, like
Yeah,
he checks all the boxes, he checks all the privilege
right.
boxes, and then he's like, oh
Hmm.
damn. The funny thing is that his mutation isn't even like a bad mutation. Man, I got wings.
Hmm.
Oh, I got wings and make me look an angel. Oh my god.
I feel like such a freak, such an outcast. Yeah, that's. I
See,
mean, I
fluffy
feel
angel.
like. I mean, I think in terms of Jean Grey.
Yeah, she definitely has
Mhm.
melanin for sure.
Yeah, I mean the thing as far as her is the red hair. That's really like I think do what I look. I'll put it this way. I don't know. We might get a Halle Bailey Ariel scenario. So, like, trust me, I would not be mad at it. I'm
Look,
just saying. Like, I've sort of gravitated toward Madeline Petch from Riverdale as Jean Grey. I feel like she could sort of carry it. Like it sort of works. And usually I'm not that person that's sort of static in terms of keeping white characters white. Honestly, that most of the time is not even a consideration. But I think that would be a really, really, really good part for her
all
because
I'm
she does the caring and she does the mean girl very well. And I think Jean has to have some sass in there too, and I think she does that really well.
well, I don't have a good fan cast for you, I will admit. But all I'm saying is that the ninth pick was Victor Von Doom, but like
Hmm.
Latina Jean Grey would not have been controversial at all.
No, I agree. That would have been great. It actually would have been a much smarter move.
Like
In my mind, I think it would have been a smarter move, but it is what it is.
La Phoenix would have she would have been the spiciest of the spiciest Latina, the hot tempered bird.
I am spice and life incarnate, sazon incarnate.
Exactly. But I mean, maybe another stereotype.
Another season. Oh, I hope that wasn't racist.
It's a little bit. It wasn't by design. It wasn't by design. That was actually it was one of the first times that the pun was unintentional. But yeah, I mean, no, but in all fairness, a good pick for the Polynesian delegation. I'm very curious to see how well they hold on to their title this year. Drafting
And
it.
it stays in keeping with Tomati was our delegate for a good long while, and he loves his mutants, so
Yeah,
still honoring him.
for sure, for sure. I mean, hopefully Tommy comes back. Hopefully he's back on the
Hmm.
podcast soon. We miss you, Tommy. Shout us out.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Braden.
Hmm.
But yeah, like we're kicking it with the season. The season is underway. We're doing the thing. So listeners, do your follow us anywhere you get podcasts. We're also on YouTube if you want to look at our faces or my face this week. It's Randy's just an R.
My letter.
But yeah, you can follow us in video form. We do a video podcast on Spotify as well. So if you're watching us there, but also tell your friends, like, subscribe, do that thing. Social media, Blue Sky. Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. We got
Is racial draft on Blue Sky?
Racial Draft is on Blue Sky. Follow us there.
Let me go do that right now.
Yeah, we've got TikTok content as well. I'm always trying to cajole some of the delegates to put their pics out there on TikTok. So, maybe you'll see some of those TikTok exclusives. But we're out here. That's what and we're gonna stay out here, into the new year, into 2025, full steam ahead with picks. And we'd love to hear your takes. We'd love to hear suggestions for characters and suggestions for fan casts. And we're going to keep this racial draft train moving. But that's really it for. I mean, we. Any big nerd news stories? I know you haven't seen Creature Commandos, but I got a shout out. I do have to shout out the South Asian delegation because they got two in Creature Commandos. In The Bride,
Hmm.
as played by Indira Varma, and Cersei,
Yep.
also played by a South Asian actress whose name escapes me right now. And they do have those two characters drafted in their dynasty draft. So
Yep.
we'll see whether that shapes their strategy going forward. But I'm enjoying Creature Commando so far. I think that it's a little bit the animation thing has probably given James Gunn like maybe too much freedom. If you can imagine the Suicide Squad plus
Hmm.
like even more extreme version of the Suicide Squad, that's Creature Commandos. So I'm having fun with it, but I also understand why some people might find it a lot. So we're gonna
Well, as somebody who has not yet, like I'm the one person still living under the rock who has not seen the Harley Quinn
animated
animated
series.
show yet.
Wow,
Would it
Randy.
be like that or like
No, it's not.
beyond even that?
No, the Harley Quinn and also the spinoff, Kite Man series. Those two are that's
Hmm.
like the furthest extreme of crazy.
Okay.
But given that one of the things that we know about Creature Commandos is that it's supposed to sit like in the same universe as the
Hmm.
DCU, just in animated
Yeah.
form, and even going as far as the actors who are voicing the characters are also going to be portraying them in live action. So there has to be a certain amount of consistency across those depictions.
Yeah.
That kind of provides a little bit of a limiting factor in my mind as far as how extreme we could go. But it does feel like Creature Commandos is pushing that limit. So that could be a good thing for some
I
people. You
mean,
know,
I intend to Creature Commandos is further up on my to-do list, sadly, than Harley Quinn. So I'll get on that and we can really get into it later on.
yeah, cool. But yeah, so give us your thoughts, whether it's about the most recent Marvel news, most recent DC news as they continue to break. We'll talk about it all in the podcast and in the new season, but we'll definitely keep talking about the picks. Did I mention? I don't
Hmm.
think I did mention the approval rating for Jean Grey, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Before we go, the approval rating for Polynesian Jean Grey is 100%. Yes, that's correct. There was a fan cast, Courtney Eden. You might know her from Yellow Jackets. You might know her from other stuff, but I only know her from Yellow Jackets. And the approval rating there was 87.5%. But that was our last little bit of racial draft business, and we will
Hmm.
leave you there. Tune in next week, same race time, same race channel. But until then, all things are possible.